Hello everyone, my name is Young-ah from South Korea. I am an activist of Center for Peace and Disarmament of People's Solidarity for Participatory Democracy. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak in international symposium. As you all know, tensions between North and South Korea have been escalating. On June 9th, North Korea cut off and shut down all lines of official dialogue with South Korea, including at the resident office near the border, military communication hotlines, and a line between North Korea ruling party and South Korea presidential office because of anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border. Then, on June 16, DPRK blew up an inter-Korean relation office, which was the symbol of April 27 Panmunjom Declaration. The North Korea Army announced that it was drawing up its military plans, but the Central Military Commission made the decision to suspend it. Current situation is very embarrassing to recall the touching moment when the two leaders of anti-Korea crossed the military demarcation line together, and the soldiers of two Koreas shook hands in DMZ 2 years ago. This is because the agreement between Inter-Korea Summit and between the DPRK-US have not been properly implemented. In 2018, the two Koreas agreed to cease all hostile acts against each other and build trust in the agreement on the implementation of the historic Panmunjom Declaration in the military domain. However, ROK and US are continuing to join the military exercise just on a small scale, which pressure the DPRK with overwhelming military capabilities. DPRK is standing against them by military exercise such as a short-range missile launch. Even though the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has urged in public for the sanction against the DPRK and other countries to be lifted or stopped under the situation of COVID-19 pandemic, Washington's policy maximum pressure and sanctions toward the DPRK is kept in place. As long as the force against the force structure endures, it would be difficult to expect development to the peace process on Korean Peninsula. The ROK government should no longer just put blames on the international constraints and other situations. As Seoul has announced that it would steer the wheel of the peace on the peninsula, it should put active efforts to dismantle current status. However, the ROK government's policies have either been initially followed or retreated. Even after the Panmunjom Declaration, in which both states agreed on phases of disarmament, the military expenditure of ROK increased by about $5.68 million, exceeding $40.6 billion for the first time in 2020. This is a sum that outstrips of GDP of DPRK. Persuading the DPRK to give up the new nuclear weapons and missiles, while investing this much into conventional weapons would result in vain. Also, sanctions against the DPRK are preventing inter-Korean exchange and cooperation. Projects such as the Gaesong Industrial Complex and Mount Gumgang tours have yet to resume. Inter-Korea exchange and cooperation projects agreed upon by the leaders of Korea have not been carried out due to the sanctions, especially US government. The ROK government have not lifted its own sanctions that began after Cheonan sinking, and is also reluctant to persuade the international community to stop the sanction. More waiting for the policy changes of DPRK without a clear and active changes of stance to break the current deadlock, such as disarmament or stopping military actions, mutual security and sanction relief, may consequently lead to closure of the gate on peace regime of the Korean Peninsula and denuclearization that was opened by the Panmunjom Declaration. Inter-Korean dialogue should be resumed as soon as possible. To do so, it is urgent for ROK and the US to take a preemptive action to show trust in ROK, in DPRK. Above all, whether ROK and US joint military exercise scheduled for August will be the important factor in future inter-Korean relations and the situation on the Korean Peninsula. It is important to remember that dialogue and military actions are incompatible, and that there is no progress in the relations without the withdrawal of a hostile policy. The ROK government needs to remember that the peace process on Korean Peninsula in 2018 began with the decision to postpone the joint military drills. Furthermore, the suspension of the joint military drills was that President Trump has promised Chairman Kim Jong-un twice. Also, it goes against the purpose of the Inter-Korean Military Agreement. Last July 1st, the UN Security Council unanimously adopted a resolution expressing its support for the Secretary General appeal for the global ceasefire, which he issued in March to help the united efforts to fight COVID-19 in the most vulnerable countries. The government of ROK and US should decide to stop joint military exercise at all costs in order to implement the resolution. The bilateral relationship between government ROK and Japan have been at their worst due to Japanese government adversarial economic measures against the ROK in July last year. In response to ROK's Supreme Court ruling admitting the claims of victims of forced labor during the Japanese colonial rule of the Korean Peninsula. The Japanese government's repeated attempt to revise Article 9, the peace clause of the Japanese constitution, are perceived with Northeast Asia as an omnibus expression of Japanese militarism and a rejection of dialogue as a means to resolve dispute. I would like to introduce the Korea-Japan Peace Network of religious groups, civil society, that was meaningfully persuaded by religious groups and civil societies of both countries. They discussed the launch of the platform amidst the worst relationship status between the two countries. The platform aims for Article 9 of the Japan Constitution, the construction of a peace community, nuclear-free Northeast Asia, non-governmental interchange, and peace education for future generations. The platform launched last July 2nd. I think this would take on essential role in forming civic discussion and cooperation to install peace between Japan and Korea thereafter. The year 2020 marks the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of Korean War. The unstable armistice of the past 70 years have not only brought the great pain to the people of our divided peninsula, it has also threatened peace in Northeast Asia and wide world. The horrendous war left millions of casualties and separate countless families. The whole country was destroyed. Since then, anxiety, hatred, and military tensions have dominated the lives of people on Korean Peninsula. Despite the end of Cold War, the Korean Peninsula remains caught in the instability of the armistice. The peninsula remains a battlefield of the international community in international military hegemony and has propelled the international nuclear arms race and proliferation. Korean civil society and religious groups have been preparing for the peace campaign to end the Korean War, with this desperate heart and desperation for the peace on the Korean Peninsula since the last February. We launched this campaign on July 27th. This campaign will continue until 2023, the 70th anniversary of Armistice Agreement. Our goal is ending the Korean War. We will collect the signatures and endorsement of the Korea Peace Appeal far and wide and deliver them to governments involved in Korean War. These include RK, DPRK, US, China, and United Nations. We will exert the pressure and lobby for peace in the name of the people of the Korean Peninsula and peace-loving people around the world, so that the related countries are brought to implement measures necessary to establish a peace regime on Korean Peninsula. We appeal to peace-loving people around the world to join this call. Separated families must be able to meet each other as soon as possible. Our texts and resources should be used for people's safety, happiness, and sustainable environment, rather than preparing for war. Let's build together a future of cooperation, peaceful coexistence on Korean Peninsula and for the world. Thank you very much.